Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting of the 21st of July 2021. My name is Councillor Ian Pickett and I am the chair of this meeting. So the first order of business, there is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, could I ask that you make your way down the main staircase, out of the main doors of the Town Hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will then give instructions when it's safe to enter the building. Okay, so moving into the formal agenda, item 1 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2021. Can I ask a show of hands for those who are happy with that? Okay. I make that unanimous. Okay. Item 2 are apologies for absence. Claire, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. One apology from Councillor Mrs Brown, but no substitute this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. So to receive interests of non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. Are there any? No. B, pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. No. And C, notice under section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Okay. So item 4 are applications for consideration. There are 2 applications this evening and there are no public speakers. So we will come first to item R20/0566, Bridge 24, Fields Farm Lane, Martin. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is Bridge 24, Fields Farm Lane, Martin. It's a full planning application for the demolition of existing Bridge 24, the regrading of the ground level to create a crossroad in conjunction with the disused railway tracks and the diversion of the right-of-way. So I've just done a bit of a site location plan aerial shot here because it's in quite an isolated location. So the bright green line, as you can see running through here, is the disused railway. The conversion of this was actually granted at Planning Committee in April with my colleague Erica. The villages of Birdingbury and Martin are in the yellow and the bridge itself is in the red circle. So I've attached here a couple of plans for you to get an idea of what it's going to look like. So the bridge is being demolished, as I've said before, and it's being replaced with the ramps you can see here in the cross section, and it'll run through here. You currently access the bridge via that track with which the farmer will go over, but that's obviously going to be lowered and the ramps put in. There'll be a concrete pad in the middle, and this will be the smooth running of the walking and cycling route. I've got some site photos here. So this is the bridge itself. Then we've got another collection. So this is on top of the bridge. The access to the bridge you can see just up there, past the barn, and that's the view from on top down what will be the cycling and walking route. I've also chosen to include some photos from the principal inspection that was undertaken in April 2021, so this year. As you can see, it is in quite a bad state of disrepair. There are numerous cracks, and this has been as a result of overloading as farm machinery throughout the years has got larger and heavier. The bridge now can no longer withhold it. It has also had quite a lot of animal burrowing, which doesn't help the situation, and it doesn't have a very good drainage system. So as you can see here, water is leaking into the cracks, removing the mortar and making the situation worse. So moving on to key considerations. So the principle of the development, the bridge is located within the open countryside. The access tracks are located within the green belt. This has been considered acceptable under paragraph 146 of the MPPF as of the 2019 version, This did change as of yesterday. So this will be considered acceptable under the engineering operations section. In terms of openness, we're obviously removing a physical structure from the green belt. The bridge is being demolished, and the access track will be lowered, creating less of an impact on the openness of the green belt. So, as I mentioned just before on the previous slide, the structural inspection has determined that it's unable to fit modern machinery across it anymore. It is in a poor condition with significant damage from overloading. It is at risk of collapse, and this will obviously be a detriment to the health and safety of the future greenway users, cycle, walking, and the local farmers themselves. In terms of railway heritage, it is considered a non-designated heritage asset by the council. A heritage statement has been submitted, and it has been determined that the loss of the bridge will not detract from the historical value of the line as a whole. And then finally, in terms of residential amenity, the closest neighbouring dwelling is approximately 150 metres from the bridge itself. Therefore, I'm recommending approval, subject to condition. And finally, there is just a slight amendment to condition 4, and I've just detailed the amendment there in red.
Do we have any speakers? Okay, Councillor Eccleston. I think we're happy to just move into debate because there are no speakers, so if you have any questions then they can go to the officer as part of the debate.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a question. From the drawing, I see you're actually lowering the pathway. Is that the track for the farmer to be able to use in the future?
Yes, that's correct. So he can access his field on the other side of the cycling walking pathway. Okay, so
any cyclists or walkers would not be able to leave the track, I take it, to get up onto what is currently the walkway. Then they wouldn't need to. They're already on that section. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Gillies.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I've got to move approval on this. Clearly, this bridge has got to a point where it's gone back to its sell-by date, if you like. But I just want to point out the fact that the skills that were needed to construct these bridges are never to be seen again. And it's up to the custodians of the people that own these bridges and look after them to make sure that they do care for them. When you see a bridge that's completely overgrown with undergrowth and trees, that has to be kept completely clear from any brick structure. And I think they ought to be monitored, certainly on a biannual basis, because it can completely wreck a brick structure. And if you think about the hard work and graft and skill that went into building those, it's the very last resort we have to get to knock them down. Let's try and preserve them for future heritage, for future generations. But as I say, I'll still move approval on this one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gillies. And I do agree with you. I think we do need to preserve these structures where they can be preserved. But obviously, in this case, I think, as you and the officer have said, it is probably beyond that point. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm happy to second this. I hate to see heritage bridges destroyed at any time. I mean, I'm next to the Great Central Way, and we've got bridges dating back to 1895 and before. So yes, I totally agree with Councillor Gillies. Those heritage assets do need to be maintained, and I think there's some money in our budget to do that. But however, this one's gone beyond the point of no return, and either we pull it down or it's going to fall down. And I think the solution that's been come up with is viable. It's going to be a good solution in terms of access to the Lias line for future cyclists. And so overall, this is a very positive application.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Rabin and then Councillor Watson-Merritt.
Thank you, Chair. No, I agree with both of those points. And although, unfortunately, I would have moved to refuse the application because of the state of the bridge in the report, regrettably, I would also agree with both colleagues in approving. But as a point to note, I think all too often the huge endeavours of the 19th century railway pioneers are being ignored more and more, and we do need to not take them for granted, and actually I think bear in mind consideration in future planning applications for any non-designated heritage sites. It's regrettable that architecture, construction, and a presence within the landscape is being lost gradually. So regrettably, I'd agree with both colleagues and move to approve.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important when councillors are faced with the big flags, for example, heritage asset on railways and greenbelt asset, we're always minded to really carefully consider these things for future generations. And I support what my colleague Tony Gillies has just mentioned. But I think that the officers have really looked at important considerations. We as Rugbyans know that we have a huge rural support network for our farmers, and we hear that the bridge is unfit for purpose. Vehicles that the farmers use today cannot fit that bridge. It's important also to consider the architectural style that's been used, and certainly what else has been considered is the cycle routes and the access to the greenways surrounding that. So I'm minded to support this for my colleagues as well. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, just a quick question on that one. In terms of members' concerns about non-designated heritage assets, would that in fact require a supplementary planning document within our local plan so that those assets could be preserved? Because if the local plan is silent upon it, then we just have to go to National Planning Policy Framework. So if members want to push it, then I'll suggest you talk to the Chair about an item coming to Planning Services Working Party.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. I'll certainly note your comments, and if it's appropriate to do so, we'll certainly look at this. Councillor Gillies.
Yeah, just one thing to add, Chair, and for the new members, they probably don't realise that past planning committees, whatever's been discussed in here doesn't get written down. It isn't written down in the minutes verbatim. But now we've got the beauty of cameras. And I'm looking right in the lens of that camera there, and I'm pleading to these people in control of these assets to look after them.
And I'm sure that will have been heard. Are there any further speakers? No. So it has been moved for approval by Councillor Gillies and seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All those in favour of approval, please raise your hands. I make that unanimous. Okay. So that is approved, subject to the conditions. Thank you very much, Francis. So we will now come to item R21/0364, and that's with Sam Green, who will be with us in a moment. So if I could just ask everyone to wait for a moment.
Good evening, everyone. The following presentation will involve the application R210364 at number 2 Fisher Avenue. The application seeks outline planning permission for the erection of one dwelling. The outline planning application includes access, landscaping, layout, and the appearance and scale will be reserved. Here we have some site photos pictured from Fisher Avenue. As you can see, currently the proposal site is occupied by the single-storey garage, which serves the host dwelling, which is number 2 Fisher Avenue, which is pictured to the left. Here are some site photos from St John's Avenue. As we can see, the junction of Fisher Avenue and St John's Avenue. The proposal site is largely screened by the vegetation. This makes up a character of St John's Avenue, and at the foot of St John's Avenue we have Avon Park School and Paddock School, a primary school, which will be discussed later in the application. Here are some site photos of some similar dwellings within proximity to the proposal site. The image to the left is number 244 Fisher Avenue. This would have a similar prominent corner positioning to the proposed dwelling. And to the right hand side we have number 13, which is a detached dwelling which opposes the proposal site. There are also examples of detached dwellings to number 19 and number 21. Here we have the proposed plans for the site. As can be seen, the dwelling is a detached dwelling, number 2A on the site plan there. It would sit centrally within the plot. It has a prominent corner positioning on St John's Avenue and Fisher Avenue, and it also would have adequate residential amenity space to the north and west directions of the dwelling. To the front of the site would be hard surfaced, and it would be accessed by the existing access to number 2 with an extension of the drop curb directed away from the junction, which would then be used for the newly formed separate dwelling of number 2. In regard to the landscaping, which features along the boundary there, we would have new hedging, new picket fence, and would use mixed indigenous tree planting to the border. So some key considerations for this development. In principle, it's located within the Rugby urban area, which is the main focus for all development, and therefore it would be in accordance with policy GP2. The character of the surrounding area is a residential one, and the dwelling would be in keeping with the other detached houses which feature along Fisher Avenue, and as demonstrated in the previous slides. The vegetation currently contributes well to the overall street scene, and these details of the vegetation have had a condition placed upon them by the arboricultural officer, which would require specification of the vegetation to be used, which would have to be approved in writing by the local planning authority. This would ensure that the vegetation would both be in harmony with the street scene, but also up to technical standards. Condition 3 is that of the reserved matters. This would ensure that the scale and appearance of the proposal would meet have to be approved by the local planning authority at a later stage, and ensures that it would be within character in the street scene and well designed. In regards to residential amenity, as currently the scale and design aren't part of this application, we can't fully assess the impact on the residential amenity. However, we do have the layout, and from the layout we can tell that the property would sit on a similar building line to number 2, the neighbouring dwelling, and also would extend back to the rear at a similar distance. There's also a 20-metre separation distance to the property to the rear, and therefore in this case the impact on residential amenity in terms of overlooking has been deemed as minimal. In other matters, the proposal did receive a number of objections and was called into committee due to highways concerns and impact on pedestrian safety for the schools at the foot of St John's Avenue. Warwickshire County Council Highways have no objection to this proposal, and in further discussion with Highways, it was explained that as the access already exists for number 2 Fisher Avenue, the new development would have a similar impact to that of the existing. Water runoff was raised via an objection. However, as the proposal site is not located in flood zone 2 or 3, nor is the proposal considered a major development, the local planning authority would not require a sustainable drainage system. Air pollution and noise were also raised via objections. The technical consultee regarding this environmental health had no objection to the proposal, subject to a condition which would then ensure that the development meets air quality neutral standards or would provide suitable mitigation. As the proposal is deemed to be acceptable in principle, in keeping with character and design, and would have no significantly detrimental impacts to residential amenity, as all objections have been considered in the decision, and as no technical consultees currently have any objections subject to conditions, and as all reserved matters, tree planting, air quality, materials, boundary treatment and earthworks are all safeguarded in condition, it is of my opinion that the proposal would be in line with the local plan and therefore would be recommended for approval subject to the conditions of the decision notice. Thank you.
Councillor Eccleston and then Councillor Gillies.
Yeah, just one question for the officer. It's got mature hedges around the existing property at the moment. Why can't they be retained? Why are they being, I assume they're being removed and replaced with new hedging?
In discussion with the arboricultural officer, he did make an assessment on the quality of the hedges and the vegetation there. He did make the judgment that it was of low biodiversity quality. However, in the condition that is put in place on the decision notice, he will have a say in what vegetation will be used on the boundary, and I'm sure that's something that he will be considered as well, the removal of what is existing and already there.
Thanks, Chairman. I haven't actually got a question, but are we okay to move into debate? Okay. Well, thanks very much to Sam, the officer, for the site visit this afternoon. That was very good, very informative. It was pretty obvious to those that were there that we've got a lot of conifers that have grown way out of hand, and they'd probably need to be managed before they even go further out of hand. But as long as we're all happy and probably satisfied that when the reserve matters come, we can have that come back to committee. So I'm happy to move approval.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Shrivastava.
Thank you, Chair. It was good. We went on the site, and thank you, the officer, for this. A traffic assessment is the biggest problem I can see. Though Warwickshire Highway Authority had no objections, I'm not sure what the assessment they have made and what time they have made, because considering the situation itself, is a busy time, is school time, and 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and there were double parking on both sides. So sometime for emergency situations, situation could be quite difficult regardless of time, ambulance. So I don't know, when they say no objection, what is the basis they have done no objection?
So I received the statement from Highways of a no objection. I then managed to get some time to speak to an officer for Warwickshire County Council Highways and sort of get them to justify the reasons, and also run by some of the issues that had been brought up in objections by residents. The main reasoning was that the access to be used for number 2A, it would be going no closer to the junction, which was an issue that people had raised, and it would in fact be that of the existing access. So the way then would be that of the new occupants of the new dwelling. It was their determination that that impact would not be enough to warrant an objection, and wouldn't increase traffic was another thing that was brought up. Also, although at this stage we can't say how many bedrooms are going to be in the property, it is indicated that this will be a 3-bedroom dwelling of whatever scale is later decided, and there would be enough parking spaces to accommodate and alleviate some of that issue with the on-street parking. So the new dwelling would hopefully, it would be in line with policy, and it would stop that issue of on-street parking, and they would all be parked on either in the internal garage, if that eventually gets put there, or on the hard surface in which is going to be made.
Okay, thank you for that. So we have Councillor Lewis and then Councillor Watson-Merritt.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for the report on the site visit this afternoon. It was very informative. I noticed that the report the application has been brought to the committee according to the report because Councillor Roothouse called it in. And he had 2 points that he commented about, which are repeated in the report. I think you've answered one of them probably. One was the proximity to the busy junction of St. John's Avenue. I think you've probably already covered that because you reckon that the Highways Authority have no objection to the application.
So in regards to the proximity, the users of that driveway would be the same. It would just be being used for a new dwelling. The proximity is in fact further away for the existing property of number 2 in the extension of the drop curve distance away from the junction.
Right. Okay. The other points he made are related to sustainable design and what's included in the local plan. And have you answered those 3 points that he made?
So in regards to the assessment in line with SDC 1 of the local plan, we only currently have to assess the access, the layout, and the landscaping. So in terms of the landscaping, at this stage that is pretty much protected under, I think it's condition 6 off the top of my head, which Dave has put, the arboricultural officer has put in place to ensure that the vegetation is up to standard and would also be in character for the street scene. In regards to access, that is something that Highways have spoken on, and as far as from a planning perspective would be concerned, we would lean on their specialism at that point, and if they don't have an objection from a planning perspective, we would agree with that. And then for the third one, which is most likely to be related to design, is the layout of the building. From that perspective, it's of a good size and scale to fit within the plot. It has adequate amenity space. And then the reserved matters of the appearance and the scale is where the proposal is likely to come under more scrutiny in regards to its design and its impact on the character of the street scene.
Okay. I know a number of the queries I brought up this afternoon, the answer was it'll be dealt with in reserved matters, so I'd echo Councillor Gilius's request that the reserved matters be brought back to this committee to be decided. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, and I suspect there will be a number of councillors wanting to call this back at reserved matters stage. So we've got Councillor Watson-Merritt, and then we'll come to you, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second for approval on this, and I attended the site visit, and it was really useful because 2 reasons. We could actually stand on those junctions from St. John's Avenue and Fisher and actually get a good idea of the distances from the dropped curb, and then consider the traffic from vehicular access, motorised vehicles, close proximity to schools and pedestrian use of the curb, as well as cycles and wheelchair access. And I was satisfied that the officers have done a great job of placing the curb, the drop curb, in a position which is in accordance with the tree policy. There's a beautiful silver birch right on the edge of that curb, and having walked around the house from the frontage of the house, I do think that it's in harmony with the street scene. The tree is not quite mature, but it's in a position where it could sustain a little bump from somebody inadvertently reversing incorrectly. And there's a great big electric light post, huge substantial piece of furniture on that right next door to the silver birch. So anyone touching the silver birch will probably touch the pole as well. So I think from that point of view, the harmony of the street, and given the character and design conditions that have been placed in it, conditions 6 and 3, I think we're in a good position to support this and then also have some control over the development itself in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I know this property pretty well. It's at that junction, it's a rat run for two schools, Paddocks and Ashlawn. And Ashlawn used it quite heavily. In terms of, in terms of site layout, will a vehicle be able to leave the site in a, and I can imagine there'll be two vehicles if it's a 3-bedroom dwelling, will a vehicle be able to leave the site in a forward gear?
Again, this would be something that Warwickshire County Council Highways will have looked into and assessed. That wouldn't be something I would be able to make an assumption on at the moment, but I do have to agree with their assessment of the proposal, and as of one of no objection, I'm guessing, and as the accessor to the site is already the one that will be used is already there as existing, that entering and leaving that driveway would not be an issue. Just further from that, in the discussion with Highways, he did dive into some of the data there for accidents on that junction. There was one he brought to my attention, and it was not related to the access on or off of that driveway.
Councillor Eccleston?
Yeah, just re-observation. I think a majority of those streets all the way along the Ashlawn Road there are rat runs for various reasons, from the Lower Hill Morton up to Ashlawn Road. And I think also on the point of the Councillor Sanderson raised there about being able to leave in a forward gear, I don't think that you can actually enforce that. It's up to the individual to reverse into their driveway or drive into their driveway, or if it's most convenient for them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Eccleston. I believe on the site visit we were shown where the potential turning head for the new property would be, so I think that has been considered satisfactorily at this stage, but obviously thank you for drawing it to the committee's attention. Are there any further questions or comments from anyone? No? Okay. It has been moved for approval by Councillor Gillius and seconded by Councillor Watson-Merritt. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can I say just one thing? Those who were on the site visit this afternoon, we were there at a time when the roads weren't busy, and it's completely different when, as Councillor Sanderson has said, both the schools are exiting. It becomes very, very congested. So that's just the difference between the two views. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Watson-Merritt?
Thank you, Chair. I actually took it upon myself to go there during school run on another day, and I'm content that it wasn't a rat run, and it certainly wasn't in any way endangering anyone using the school run.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I have also been there at various times in that general area, and whilst it does get extremely busy at times, especially around school drop-off site, I can't see that this particular application would significantly alter that one way or the other were we to approve or refuse it. So, as I said, it has been moved for approval by Councillor Gillius and seconded by Councillor Watson-Merritt. All those in favour? I make that unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Sam. So we'll now move on to item 5, advance notice of site visits. Richard, have there been any notifications?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have had an advance notice of a site visit. It's for a site over at Paleton. The reference number is R21/0376. The request has come for this application to be called to committee and for a site visit from Councillor Gillius on the grounds of greenbelt, sustainability, amenity and intensification of use of the access. I believe it's the conversion and works to the old telephone exchange on the outskirts of the village to enable it for use for residential purposes. I'm aware that the case officer asked for elements of clarification, but obviously we would talk about that in more detail with the councillor in question. But with regard to the actual call letters, that's the request that's been made, is if that can come to committee and then have a site visit.
Thank you very much, Richard. All those who are happy to undertake a site visit, unless there are any questions, you could show using your hands. Nine in favour? Okay. Any opposed to undertaking a site visit? So I think that is carried, so we'll undertake that. Councillor Lewis?
Can I just ask, will that be a virtual site visit or an actual site visit?
I would hope very much that it would be an actual site visit, but obviously, should circumstances change, we'll have that conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, so we now come to item 6, which is a diversion of part of Bridleway R163 and footpath R163C straight mile Bourton on Dunsmore, and that's with Richard. So Richard, over to you.
As just described, yes, this is a diversion of part of a bridleway, R163, and part diversion of a public footpath, R163C, at Boots Farm, the straight mile near Bourton on Dunsmore. In July 2017, outline planning permission was granted for the restructuring of an existing industrial buildings at Boots Farm, including demolition of redundant buildings and construction of new buildings on the site. A variation to this outline planning permission was then granted in 2018 to allow the units to come forward on a phased basis. Then in May 2020, approval of the reserved matters was granted for the first phase. What these plans show here is that was the original layout of the site, and this is now the new layout of the site that has been approved, so the light blue are the areas that have actually been approved. Part of the development then requires a diversion of the bridleway, which currently runs through the middle of the site, and part of the footpath, which goes off at a tangent at this site. So in May 2021, an order under the provisions of Section 257 of the Town and Country Planning Act was made and advertised. The effect of the order is to stop up part of the bridleway and the footpath and create a new diversion. So as mentioned, the existing bridleway runs like this, and the existing footpath runs like this. The diversion is actually from this point here, so the bridleway will go up to here and round to Barn. On the footpath side, it will come round this way. We've received no objections to this footpath order, and so therefore the recommendation is if we can ask committee to approve the public footpath order, please. Unopposed. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Eccleston?
Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it, really? I mean, and, you know, in terms of horses going through the middle of a now an industrial site, I think it's a bit unsafe. So I would move to approve.
Thank you very much, Peter, and Councillor Eccleston even. And yeah, as you say, it's just the sensible thing to do, so I'm happy to second that from the chair. Are there any further comments on this one? Councillor Gillies.
Well, just to say it's going to be a really nice scenic view going around the outside rather than going through between the buildings. Yeah, it'd be good.
And possibly a little more exercise for anyone using it. Okay, so all those in favour of approving this? Yep, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. Right. So now we come to delegated decisions to note. Are there any speakers on that one? No? Okay, so those are noted. So that nearly concludes the public business for this evening. However, before we move on to the private business, there is just one final thing that I want to draw to committee's attention. and that is that some of us may be aware that it is in fact the final planning committee that someone here will be attending, and that's our Chief Officer for Growth and Investment, Steph Jabray. So Steph's been with us for nearly 3 years, since October 2018, I believe. And I think whilst you've been here, you've obviously led us through some fairly exciting projects, a number of which have come before this committee and indeed full council. So I think on behalf of the current members of the planning committee and those over the past few years, I'd just like to thank you for your service and wish you the very best in future.
Hear, hear. Well done, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so we now come to a motion to exclude the public under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act and to consider that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of information defined in paragraph 2 of section 12A of the Act. I will move that from the Chair. And thank you for that, Councillor Gillies. All those in favour? Okay. So thank you very much to anyone who's been watching, and IT, if you could stop the live stream now, please.